Hey guys, welcome back. A few announcements before we get started. There are tickets still available for our Secret Space Conference. That link is below in the chat. And last episode, I mentioned that there was no on-site lodging available, but there was camping available. That is true, but I forgot to mention, there are plenty of Airbnbs and hotels available nearby if you're still looking to come. Still plenty of tickets available. And if you can't make it, grab a live stream ticket. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're getting excited. It's right around the corner, just a little over a month away. So yeah, we hope to see you guys all there. Tonight, we are joined by John W. Warner the Fourth. He's an author, historian, researcher, and his father was Senator John Warner III, who was the Secretary of the Navy, and his mother was Catherine Mellon of the Mellon banking family of Pittsburgh. I guess I'll turn it over to you, John, let you explain I'll let you explain that.
My cousin Chris Mellon, we were friends, but we've had a bit of a falling out, especially after my Twitter adventure. But he worked for the CIA and the DIA, probably still does, because you never leave those positions. My wife is ex-CIA. I know a lot about it. I have a lot of friends. I have in the Office of Naval Intelligence, friends of my father, But Chris, he and Lou Elizondo have been on the forefront of this UAP office and UAP task force. They were doing the To the Stars Academy, which is a goofy CIA psyops. I told him that. He kind of agreed, but I'm just, as I've said in other interviews, I found myself 25 years ago at sort of a nexus of things, doing family research. I'm a military historian. I spent a lot of time with my dad traveling the world. And so I finally started to realize that my family was very much involved in the national security state since World War II and maybe before. And also because of the financial banking, they were really involved in, what you would call the deep state of before World War II. But it's a very complex, long story. I don't know how much you want to get into it, but Chris and I have had, exchanged some shells, long distance naval shells on Twitter and things like that. I've left because Twitter is a shit show, and most people just want to be entertained. It's not really a good forum for information. And of course, there's a lot of trolls and very nasty people out there who, are probably on the payroll.
Right.
Somebody's payroll.
Oh, yeah.
So how did your cousin take it when you told him about To the Stars being a psyop? I mean, you said he kind of agreed, but how did he end up in that position, and what was going on there?
Well, we had seen each other years ago at a family reunion. His brother had passed away. We saw each other at a funeral. We actually went to camp together in 1973 when we were boys. But he and I had a long discussion at my farm. And I said, I really want to help you because I know a lot about it. Disclosure, I told him a story. I showed the MJ-12 files to my dad in 1993. When I was 31, and after a few months of back and forth, I got my dad to crack on it. Basically admitting that he knew, he was read in on a portion of the UFO file. He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and he sat on the Select Intelligence Committee for many years. And he, of course, he worked with the Navy and Marines closely, and I've known a lot of these admirals and people that we've traveled the world with all over the years. I met Bobby Ray Inman and all of them. And, I always had UFOs on the mind as a younger man. And the Navy all seemed very excited. Bobby Ray Inman, in the 90s, he was like, oh, we're hopeful that in the early 2000s with a regime change, we'll have some disclosure and the Navy can let out some of its high technology. Well, we got 9/11 instead.
Right.
Yeah.
That, it seems like every year they try to do something. But Chris and I are at odds because what he and Elizondo are doing is a very scripted, very weak narrative. They're pushing the UAP thing, which is a distraction from the term UFO.
Yeah.
And I said, look, man, this is bullshit. Even if 10% of the wild stuff he called it is true, it's horrifying and mind blowing. And we talked about medbag technologies and things that the military wanted to let out to the public. A lot of our technology is said to be back engineered. Laptops, ballistic glass, cling wrap, fiber optics, microchips, down the line. And your cell phone has more technology in it than anything. It's incredible. Right. And of course, a lot of it's spyware. But we didn't get anywhere with each other. And I finally, Stephen Greer, who's a longtime friend, called me up and says, listen, you want to be on my new documentary? Chris and Lou aren't doing shit. And I said, yeah, they're pushing the conversation sideways. They're diluting the narrative. You got it. And so I agreed to be on I think it's called The Cosmic Hoax.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just watched it. I was just telling Tyler that before the show, and I saw you on there. I was like, oh, nice.
Yeah. I mean, and my dad urged me to come forward in his later years. He couldn't tell me a lot of things verbatim. He took his national security oath very seriously. And I said, I understand that, but this is getting to be very disturbing and serious. And what he would do is when I traveled with him and otherwise on Capitol Hill, he showed me how the deep state operates, banking, military. I mean, he showed it to me. He's like, when I grilled him in 2002, I said, look, something hit the Pentagon and it ain't no damn plane. I'm a pilot. The debris field is insufficient. Where's the luggage? Where are the bodies? Where's the jet engines and the wing indentations? And he got very upset. And he says, that's the one thing I won't talk about with you.
Really?
So what he's saying to me is, yes, a Tomahawk missile, hit it, go figure it out on your own. I can't talk about it. But other things he would talk about and over the years. But it was the MJ-12 files. I was pretty naive when I was 31. But once we had that out in the open, then I started, the Pandora's box just opened. And I started researching everything. I was a racing driver at the time, but, I would read everything and research between my schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
So going back to, you said you were friends with Stephen Greer. I know there's a lot of controversy around himself as far as he only claims that there are no negative ETs.
Right.
And do you agree with that?
No. He and I have had many conversations, and I can't get him. I said, look, man, yin and yang, duality, the universe is based up, but somehow he has fixated. Somebody told him, gave him some line of bullshit. I said, come on, I agree with you. It's mostly benevolent, some are ridiculous. But come on, our whole history has been influenced by ETs, going back millions of years. I mean, there's just no doubt that, in everything there's polarity. And if you study metaphysics and the occult, and I write about it in my books, you need both sides. There cannot be light without the dark.
Exactly.
You need that. In the Iroquois Nation, there were 7 chiefs of war and 7 chiefs of peace. I think they were Anunnaki. And he said, you have to have that balance. Of course, I think Alex Collier said it best, the Andromedans told him, Earth is the darkest place in the universe. Guadalcanal and, the Holocaust all wrapped into one, That's why everyone's taking a big interest, because this could go way south. The whole human experiment, Gaia, the Mother Earth, the environment. There's a lot of people living on this planet that we can't see, or most of us can't see. And, I don't understand why certain ET groups and everything, we can't do more and interact more on a public scale, but somehow, it's always private groups that seem to get the, contact points.
Right. I remember you said in one interview, you saw a military document that said that U.S. military was working with the Saurians, which would be, I guess, a type of reptilian.
Yes. William Tompkins references it in his book. And a few of my Navy contacts sent me through the email a document. He said, what what do you make of this? And I said, well, I'm not sure, but there's lots of talk about, reptilian races. For every insect, bird, fish, reptile on Earth, there's supposedly a bipedal,
intelligent version,
humanoid analog out in the universe. It's not a big deal. The lion-headed people of Egypt and, the Cynophilus of the Middle Ages, the dog-headed men. I mean, it's something big is going on. And, I'm a historian, and, that's where I sort of got into all this, was all the holes in history. And when you start digging into the esoteric stuff, you're like, oh, okay, now I know why they left it out. But yeah, I'm not sure why Greer takes that line. But, as you know, with the super soldiers, and I talked to one or two of them privately, we've got a lot of horrendous issues to deal with. And the problem with the disclosure movement is, I tell people this, 35 years ago when I was starting in the early 90s, I'd been a UFO fan in my whole life, Star Trek fan. And I always said, hey, it's coming, Star Trek. And all my friends were like, you're an idiot. Yeah. And then in 2017, when they came out, oh, Warner's not such an idiot after all. All my Harvard friends with their PhDs, they're all idiots. Sadly, they're all ignorant.
Indoctrination.
And so, 35 years ago, Stephen Greer, Stephen Bassett, Dolan, Linda Moulton Howe, you name it, they were considered the cutting edge fringe, the whack jobs. Now they're the old guard conservatives.
Yep.
And it's like, everyone's like, oh, that secret space program narrative, everyone has ruined that. And then there's, everyone demonizes it. Oh, are you a blue chicken fan or something? I'm like, I've seen this before. It's older folks who have seen it. And it's like Project Blue Book. And in the 80s, they were saying, oh, you're the Roswell crazies, they called them.
Yeah.
They think that something crashed and it was just a weather balloon or an Air Force jet. And I said, I've seen all this before. And same thing with Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo and the UAP initiative with Senator Gillibrand and Rubio, a bunch of dumb senators. My dad said they're all bought and paid for. He told me, we agreed on that. That's why he aligned himself with the Navy and the Marines. But man, these guys are just pathetic.
Well, I mean, that's part of the reason that we're even doing our conference based around the secret space program, because I see exactly that, the ridicule and the people are mocking it.
Within the disclosure.
Right.
Arena.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we're trying to take it seriously because to me, I mean, it's real. Let's face it. We have plenty of evidence going all the way back since the beginning of the space race. I mean, they were doing things behind the scenes. And obviously they were developing out some sort of secret programs back then, and who knows what they've blossomed into today. And now we have whistleblowers coming out talking about this stuff. And I'm sorry, like, it's just, you can't ignore it at some point.
Can't ignore all that. Exactly.
No. And the thing is with me, I come to it from a slightly different angle than most. Having grown up here in DC with my dad and my family, I mean, the Mellons have been in national security. They've been in military intelligence in droves. We're a very small banking family. There's about 130 of us. But I've been told by Navy people, oh, shit, the Mellons, they come up in the meetings. My wife said that the Mellons came up in meetings at the CIA. My uncle Tim Mellon ran a Pan Am Systems railroad. Yeah, he hauled cargo for the CIA. He bragged about it. Spare UFO parts, illegal weapons. I don't know. So, I mean, my family's deep in it. My grandfather, Paul Mellon, was OSS in World War II, and he was involved in Project Paperclip with Alan Dulles, because Alan Dulles was station chief in Switzerland, and they knew each other before the war. My grandfather knew Wild Bill Donovan, who ran the OSS. He knew Patton because he fox hunted with them out in Middleburg, Virginia, which is 60 miles that way. And, I grew up out there as well on the weekends with my dad. And, my grandfather told me all kinds of wild stories about that. He told me there were over 5,000 German scientists, assistants, not this pathetic 1,100 we're told, I started piecing this stuff together, and it became very disturbing very quick for me. I'm not proud of my family history. I'm not proud of it at all, but it is what it is. and that's why I'm come forward. You know, like I said, my dad and my wife, we discussed it. And before my dad died in June, you know, he said, you know, I trust your judgment. You need to go forward because your cousin Chris is not telling the full truth. And he was, you know, he understood national security, and, you know, they have a point. You know, some people might panic, but it's the religious people I think they're afraid of. Someone said, the ETs are very worried that people will commit suicide en masse. And so that got my attention because, you know, I'd rather just blow the whole damn thing open all at once, but that will cause some paradoxes and, you know, some suicide deaths. I mean, most people just, their hard floor reality will be gone in a second.
Right.
Yeah, that's too traumatic.
I've had all my life to come to terms with that, but a lot of people overnight, it's probably not a good idea.
Like the three of us would be absolutely
like bring it on. Yeah.
Yeah. But when you look at the majority of people and the false kind of reality most people have as their foundation, that would almost be like too fast, too traumatic. And you're right. I think it could lead to unfortunately that, and just mass chaos in general. And that's what it seems like. Even the good guys like the Alliance understand that, and they're trying to avoid that. So they're trying to push as hard as they can, but at the same time, be careful to not crack things open too fast and too much at once.
Yeah.
But again, it's like people like us that we're like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off already. Like, good Lord, like let's just do this. You know, it's like we're getting tired of waiting. But I think there needs to be a certain level of awakening on the public scale first, and that's what we see happening. I just hope that continues to happen, and without letting the deep state, because they're still trying to fulfill their agendas clearly and steer us in that direction. So we'll see how things play out, you know.
Well, you know, there's a couple of things I wanted to mention in this interview, and they're probably not going to be popular with some people. But I have enough years under my belt with this issue to notice trends. Mm-hmm. And while I'm all for, you know, I know a lot about the occult, I write about it. And my character is a woman. She embodies the divine feminine and all that. But she's a warrior as well, a light warrior, but also a warrior in World War II, spy, pilot, and her gang. But one thing I see that is, and I'm not the only one, there are a few people out there, it's not a popular thing to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I'm controversial myself. It's an Illuminati asshole, you know, fine. You know, Illuminati just means illumin. So you know, everyone in the disclosure movement's an Illuminati, but they throw it as this catch-all term. Trust me, a lot of rich people are damn stupid.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
Trust me on that. You know, at the yacht club, they're like, oh, should we play golf or tennis? I don't know. Let's have a martini. And that's it.
Yeah.
So,
very low consciousness level. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just, you know, you don't have to be blue collar or middle class to be in the disclosure movement. You know, no. You know, I've talked to some people, but they're scared to, you know, the very few ones I know that are you know, in the wealthy class, you know, ruling, you know, committee of 300 families. You know, they're like, well, I know there's something happening, but I don't want to get involved. They're scared shitless.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing I wanted to touch on is, while I definitely agree with we should all raise our vibration, consciousness, and everything, there's 10,000 attractive women on YouTube and the internet saying, oh, I'll help you with ascension, and, you know, just put this crystal in your ear, and, you know, just let go of stress and all this stuff, which is good advice. But, you know, if you really look at the shamans, and I've studied Sufi, the whirling dervishes and everything, it's a hard road. It's not this sit down with a crystal and meditate a little bit and let everything go. It takes a lot of work. And so there's this
a lot more down to earth than that. Yeah.
And I try, but there's this clear agenda, I believe. And I'm not the only one. I think Mark Passio and a few others.
He's awesome. Yeah.
It's popular, but I think there's an agenda out there to emphasize only the positive and not do the shadow work, which is the darkness. I mean, you know, you can't ignore 50% of the equation.
Yeah.
And boy, you know, I've received hate mail on Twitter and whatever for that. A few people agree with me, but most of it's like, oh, you're a hater. You know, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, trust me, you know, my grandmother, Mary Mellon, was a mystic. She knew Carl Jung and Gurdjieff and all those people. And she advised my grandfather to join the OSS because they wanted mystics. They were up against the Nazi SS, you know, Walter Gerlach and the Vril Society, Tula Society, and all their mystics channeling information. It was like, shit. And now I find out the Americans were doing so, but on a much smaller scale with FDR in the 30s. But anyway, so that's issue one. I think there's way too much emphasis. Not that you need to overemphasize the negative stuff, but God damn it, you can't ignore that.
Well,
You got to acknowledge. You got to acknowledge it, and you got to deal with it.
Oh, they're like, oh, these SSP people, they're crazy, and it's like, well, 35 years ago, they were calling everyone else crazy, but they don't remember that. And a lot of, no offense, but a lot of young people come to this, and they're like, oh, I've read 3 books, I know everything, I watched all the videos. And it's like, no, you've had to have life experience.
Well, that's like some of the best masters have lived the darkest lives because.
Exactly.
Because you can't gain wisdom without experience. So going through the people who've lived a tough life, I have a lot of respect for, and the people who've had dark past, you know, some of those are going to be your best healers and teachers because, you know, they've been there, they've done that. And that message you just said, that's what we push on this show anyway. We don't push it, but we're constantly talking about that. You can't just love and light your way out of this stuff. You know, you have to deal with it.
No, we got to
bypass it.
Bypassing. You know, I've had a very privileged life, but you know, I've dealt with mental illness in my family. I've dealt with depression, and I have chronic pain. You know, and I've been through the dark night of the soul 2 or 3 times in my life, where fuck it, I don't even want to live. And say what you want. I mean, money's not going to insulate you from the darkness. I've met a lot of dark people, and preeminent among them was when my dad had his submarine named after him in 2007. I went to the Oval Office with my ex-wife, and Cheney and Rumsfeld and Bush were there. And man, that was just, there was so much darkness. Even my ex-wife, who was not into any of this, she was like, wow, I got a shiver down my spine. I mean, these guys were cold. And you could almost sense the darkness within them. And my dad was a kind of a naive guy. He didn't understand anything that we're talking about. He, understood a little bit about UFOs and what the Navy was doing, and that side of it. But he's not a metaphysical sort. But my mother was, and her mother was. My mother was a hippie and a mystic. I mean, she read philosophy and said, "You need to read philosophy." I was like, "Oh no, all I'm interested in is old cars and race cars." But in the last 20 years, I've played catch up. I'm trying to think of the second issue that I wanted to bring up.
Well,
I'll remember it at some point.
While you're thinking of that, so this is a question I just now popped in my head. What did you see that made you realize that the secret space program is a reality? Like, what did you come across?
It was a long process. I mean, I'm very much a nuts and bolts guy. I mean, I have my I'm creative, I'm an artist and writer. But all through my life, going back to when my dad was Secretary of the Navy, and I tell this story a lot, but I'd always peeked in his top secret briefings. And he was involved in Operation Deep Freeze. And this week I found out in Wikipedia, of all places, he was involved with the Underwater National Reconnaissance Office. You can look it up, but that was a part of the Navy he was a part of. And I said, one night we were walking along in the winter, and he had a few drinks, and I said, I was 14, and I was like, I'm going to hit him up. And I said, come on, what can you tell me about Operation Deep Freeze? Why do we have stuff down there? And he's like, well, the Russians have missile silos and sub bases. We've got to have our missile silos and sub bases. I said, okay. And what, all the way down there, why? And he didn't tell me why, but he looked up the night, I had beautiful stars. He pointed up. He said, space operations. And that was the end of the conversation. Now, that was 1976. Now, fast forward to the Majestic 12 files in 1993. I'm like, oh, shit. Does Antarctica have to do with this? And he got very agitated. And he told me, listen, don't go down that road. You're going to run up against national security protocols. They're going to, people think you're crazy. Don't do it. He's trying to protect me. And I said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. So throughout the 90s, the Navy was always given the forefront of going back to World War II. The Navy was given the lion's share of crashed UFO technology because they had been dealing with it the most out at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read my book, Lion, Tiger, Bear, I have a chapter with FDR and General Marshall and Churchill in it. And they had to discuss this at this meeting is real. And they all were Freemasons, and they were all read into how the world kind of works, and Atlantis and Rudolf Steiner and all that stuff, the Egyptian mystery school information. But they knew, and apparently there had been crashes of ET spacecraft going back to the 1880s. This is separate from the airship mysteries of the 1890s, but real crashes. And I wrote it in the book I'm writing now. I expand on it, but they found intact, they crashed stuff. They found them intact. They're just floating above the ground. They can't even get inside. They're in a warehouse somewhere. They found all kinds of stuff. But, Tesla was working with FDR, we now know, in the 30s on multiple, invisibility, the Philadelphia experiment, which was, hyperdimensional travel, but they didn't have psychic navigators. That was their problem. You need that to filter, to actually navigate a vessel.
Yeah, Penny Bradley. Penny Bradley talked about that. Yeah,
exactly. I know Penny, and she's great. And so I write that. The thing is, we've always been dealing with technology that's way above our pay grade, spiritually and mentally and intellectually. But America had to, because the Germans have been doing it since God knows when. I mean, they had understood the Vedic texts, the Lords of the Black Stone, before then the Vril Society, and so they were way ahead. And I write it this way in my new book. I mean, we had to play catch up. Even though there's a story that a Navy friend sent to me. I don't know if it's true, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. Everyone knows the Philadelphia experiment story. High voltage, T. Townsend Brown did the main mass with the emitters. Physicist John von Neumann, I think the Varian brothers and Vannevar Bush and the MIT Rad Lab, John G. Trump, they were all involved. Anyway, it went south. They didn't know what they're doing. Like I said, a lack of a psychic navigator. And the Navy, they're like, oh, fuck that. We'll just flip the switch and see what happens.
Yeah.
But a Navy friend sent me a message, and he said, I don't know if this is true or not, but given the Eldridge story, the USS Eldridge, maybe. And a dark journalist it's Daniel Lisk, does a great job of piecing together the Atlantis story with the Bermuda Triangle and the U.S. military and everything. And he's done a great job with it. But my friend sent me, he said, there was this Navy crane ship. And a crane ship is this big beamy ship with a giant crane. It's for salvage operations. Now, the story goes that in 1936, this ship, and I think with some other Navy ships, were on a salvage mission, officially. But unofficially, they were looking for pieces of Atlantis technology. And what it was these crystal structures. I don't know if it has to do with the Two-Eye Stone or not, but this is down near Barbados and St. Lucia, down near South America, supposedly. Well, anyway, the ship was equipped with powerful electromagnets and radio emitters. And I'm not sure who was involved, but, probably Tesla is my guess. Maybe he was on board. Anyway, they found this structure. They sent down a Navy diving bell and maybe some divers on the hose line. And they found this one structure. And they, Tesla probably knew to activate it with this electromagnetics. Well, it came on. And, like the Bermuda Triangle, a portal opened and this ship went either into the past or the future. No one's quite sure. And what they came back with, no one knows. But the ship's name was the USS Kearsarge, Kearsarge. And I found one picture of this crane ship. It's nothing sexy about it. And but then fast forward. In 1980, my dad said, I was in high school, and he said, come to me to this movie. It's a Navy movie. It's a science fiction. It's right up your alley. And I said, sure. Anyway, it was a Kirk Douglas movie called The Final Countdown. Mm-hmm. And they had the full cooperation of the U.S. Navy. Carriers, F-14s flying off the plane. The story was they went back in time through this giant portal, and they were going to stop the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Didn't happen, but that was the story. And I thought, this is strange. But we went to the premiere, and the place was filled with Navy brass and admirals. And Kirk Douglas was there, and I'm 18, and I'm like, wow, this is cool. But an admiral sat behind us, and he patted my dad on the back, and he said, Senator, with your cooperation, now we got our recruitment film. And they were all excited. Now, the movie didn't do well. It wasn't that great. I thought it was kind of weird, Navy, the time travel. I couldn't figure out why they were cooperating. Remember, in 1980, we were just about to get Reagan in office. I think the U.S. Navy and Reagan were perhaps getting ready to disclose some of those stories about Navy and portals and the Bermuda Triangle and time travel. But instead, I think George Bush Sr. probably put the kibosh on that because as vice president, he was really the power behind the White House.
Yep.
Certainly.
He was an asshole. I met him a couple times. Trust me, I wish I could take it back. But I find those two stories very interesting. And this past week, I was talking with my wife, and I was like, this is so weird. I went to this premiere, and it was this weird film about a Navy carrier going through, I think it was the Nimitz. And, if you read back into FDR's notes, I think on Majestic Documents website, and I've talked to Dr. Bob Wood about this, FDR called UFOs celestial devices. Well, the Navy, these things have been popping out of the ocean. The Japanese were firing on the Foo Fighters, they called them. And so and there's a document that said, the Navy needs to crane these saucers out of the water, bring them back to San Diego Navy Base, and give them to Admiral Rico Boda and the Douglas Aircraft Company. So I read William Tompkins' book, and I said, shit, this is like the stories I've been chatting with my Navy friends, my ONI friends for decades. And my dad and I did a FOIA request on Admiral Rico Boda. He was an Australian born. The story goes in the book, he wasn't programmed by the American educational system.
Yeah.
Well, Forrestal and I think the Secretary of Defense and FDR, they said, we can trust this guy, put him in charge of all the spooky stuff in San Diego. Well, my dad and I did a FOIA request on him. The only reason we have one picture of Boda is because there's a Naval Aviation Tribute website, and there's a picture of him and said, thank gosh for Admiral Boda, or our Navy fighter wing wouldn't have existed, because he was a naval aviator. And my dad said, don't worry, I still got a clearance, I'll call it up. And we did 2 FOIA requests with the Navy and everything. We got 1 page.
Huh.
And it's the same thing that was on the internet. And I said, this guy's been scrubbed from history. And my dad was furious.
Oh, yeah.
He called up somebody in the Navy Department. He said, I'm looking at a picture of Boda. Here's his fighter wing. Why can't, we lost those records in a fire.
Of course they did.
Yeah, sound familiar? Yeah.
Sounds very familiar.
And the other thing about William Tompkins' book, and this is what there's a picture of him with some of the admirals. And I showed it to my ONI friend, who was a Navy captain, retired. And he said, well, I don't know about this book and all this stuff about Nordics and reptilians and Navy space fleet. But 2 of those admirals I know them, and they're real stand-up guys, and they would not be involved with this bullshit if it wasn't real. And it freaked my friend out completely. I mean, he's a 25-year Navy veteran in ONI. So I'm piecing all this shit together, and I'm like, okay, this is way too close to home. My grandfather's involved in Project Paperclip. yada, yada, yada. The Mellons, Chris Mellon's all over the news and the newspapers every time he farts. With Lou Elizondo, a lying sack of shit. He's a U.S. Army counterintelligence operative. My Navy friends told me, stay away from Lou. He's an in-country guy that interrogates people. I said, I have no reason to get anywhere near that guy.
Well, and of course, he's the face of the DOD disclosure and all that stuff.
Yeah, DOD, UAP office.
Right. So a few things. Going back to that film, you said that you called it a recruitment film, a Navy recruitment.
That's what the Admiral said. And I thought it was really weird because I'm like, why would I join the Navy if they have a science fiction film on time travel? And then I was like, oh, shit.
Well, that's key. I mean, that's huge.
I've tried to find pictures. It was at the Uptown Theater in D.C. You can find that out. That's true. I mean, my dad was a senator at the time in 1980. He was former Secretary of the Navy. There's no doubt he would be invited, and he invited me. Kirk Douglas was there. You can, it's not a tall sea tail.
Yeah,
sounds like it, but it's not. The movie is not very good. But in conjunction with William Tompkins' books and the stories and the USS Eldridge and the Kearsarge story about 1936, if that's true, then the Navy had been dealing with time travel technology since 1936.
Definitely.
Yep.
That's a game changer to me. There's no way I could prove that, but that's the story I got. And it seemed to really disturb my friend. He was like, the Eldridge story is weird enough, but this one. But I think once people get over the shock of time travel, it's like, I think they just use it every single day, and it's not a big deal.
I think
artificial or natural, it's like everyday ho-hum shit.
Well, if you
travel is time travel.
I mean, you have to imagine let's just pretend 1936 was in fact when they started using this, 2022. I
think it was a mistake. They didn't know what was going to happen. They, the Navy. I mean, the American military is like, what's this do? And they flip the switch.
That's how
a giant portal opens up to, and so, that's just the way they are.
Right.
I love the Navy and the military, but they, the top 10%, the black hats and the unacknowledged programs, fuck them.
Yeah.
But they've been in charge and they've been reckless with people's lives. Understanding in the war, they had to take risks in the Philadelphia experiment, but it's shocking. And of course, we have all these horror stories from, veterans from the secret space program. And
right. Well, so
exactly.
Going back to you were talking about the Navy retrieving wreckages from the ocean. Now, there was a program I learned about in the John Lear report called Operation Moondust, which was I can tell by your smile, about that. So, they were using the public, the official story was that Operation Moondust was retrieving debris from the space shuttles missions.
Well, they were using the Glomar Explorer. Remember the Howard Hughes ship that was designed to lift a Soviet submarine off the bottom of the ocean?
Okay.
My dad was involved in that when he was Secretary of the Navy, lo and behold. That was, yes, they tried to lift a Soviet submarine. There's some footage of it. Guess what else they were lifting off the seafloor?
Right, UFOs.
This all ties in.
Right.
Together.
Yeah, of course. I just thought I read about Operation Moondust, but I hadn't really heard of any information about these retrievals until you just told that story. But it would make sense why, because if people were to see all this activity out there, they would have to have a public reason for being out there. Like, oh, there's some space debris from whatever,
Yeah, they always have a cover.
I think the Navy, my personal view, and I wrote this into my book, Lion, Tiger, Bear, they had been sending diving bells and divers down probably in the Caribbean or elsewhere all around the world since probably the 20s, looking for pieces of Atlantis or crashed spacecraft or anything unusual. How they would find that, I'm not sure. But it would make sense given that the Kearsarge, if that story's true, it was down there with a task force and they knew where to look and they knew how to activate whatever that crystal technology was. They said it was a structure. So as you guys know, various stone the pyramids and everything else, it's made of different types of granite and sandstones. It's all piezoelectric. It's called crystal.
Yep.
So, don't get me started with that shit.
So what are your thoughts on
that'll bend your, that's a whole show right there. Just the megaliths.
Oh yeah. Easily.
You're right. So let's bring Russia into the picture here and the Soviets, because what do you think? They've been, the bad guy the entire time, the enemy the entire time, and it's looking like now they might be the actual enemy of the deep state. And what do you think Russia's involvement is in all this involvement?
Well, I'll give you some background. I was a Russian history major in college, and I went to Russia with my dad in 1990 to meet with Gorbachev, with Senator Dole, and a Kodel Senate mission, basically to tell him, please don't sell weapons to Saddam Hussein. We're going to invade. But they did anyway. But I was in the Kremlin for that. So I know a lot about Russian history. A couple things. I'm going to be careful with my words because it's inflammatory. All war, I'm against all war, even though I'm a military historian. I'm against it. It's proxy wars. It's the light versus the dark. But I didn't think Putin would invade. I was wrong. I had told that my military people, none of them thought they were going to actually do it. He did it. There are old Soviet chemical biolabs there. I think that's been established as a fact. Soviets they're no saints either. We're all pretty bad at all that stuff. I honestly don't know what's going on. I was wrong that he would invade. I mean, Putin, some people say he's a clone. He's not the real Putin. Your head gets to spinning as to what's really going on. I did catch them using old footage of Soviet military maneuvers, and when CNN came on in the early days, I think they got nailed for that.
Yeah. They were using footage from video games and all kinds of.
They do that to illustrate, but they should tell people that. But they do that to illustrate, which is not a bad way to do it, because sometimes you don't have the footage, and a picture's worth a million words. It's very strange, some of the things going on. The movie Wag the Dog, I think, should be talked about in this context. But I do think they were fighting, obviously, and the Ukrainians are suffering for it. But it is Russia attacking Russia. Ukraine was never really part of the EU. No way they were going to be part of NATO. They just sort of kind of broke away in name only. And then, Prime Minister was an actor and a comedian. I thought that was a little strange, but hey, Ronald Reagan.
Well, what about Russia's involvement in the space programs and stuff, like going back to the 50s, the saucer craze and all that stuff? We were always against Russia, the space race and all this stuff. What kind of information do you have, or have you come across any information like the Americans working with the Soviets back then, and it wasn't actually a war?
Yeah, apparently behind the scenes we were working with them, and the Cold War was just like a surface level show kind of
thing. That's exactly true. My dad said it, called me up. I was in college at University of Virginia. He called me up one day. This is back before cell phones, obviously. And it was 1982 or 3. And we got very close to nuclear war. A lot of people don't know that. But there were severe tensions between East and West. And he said, get ready. If I call you again, you get to the farm and you bring your friends with you, because we might be in for an attack. And I said, are you serious? I thought we were cooperating with the Russians on the down low about all the sensitive stuff. He's like, yes, but the generals and admirals on the surface don't know that. They're really fighting this Cold War. And so, tensions eased. You can look up that history if you want, but I'll never forget that. Yes, my dad told me that. I said, we've always been cooperating with the Russians because back to World War II, Lend-Lease, we gave a lot of planes and equipment to the Russians, food, thank God for Spam. But the Russians have a right to be angry at the West. And World War I, the British and the French let the Russians become against the German army in the Eastern Front. World War II, even worse. And as J.P. Farrell, and I agree with him, I think some type of exotic, maybe atomic munitions were used on the Eastern Front. I mean, one of my Russian historian colleagues emailed me years ago and said, it's not 27 million, we think it's more like 30 or 33 million. And you can't kill that, yes, disease and starvation, but you cannot kill that many people with bombs. And even the thermobaric coal dust Nebelwerfer rocket barrages the Germans had, and the Russians had them too. You kill a lot, they're like tactical nukes, but come on. There's a story that up near Latvia, the Germans let off an atomic device in October of 44. I can't get any information other than the person that told it to me was somewhat reliable. I have it in my notes somewhere. You just can't kill that many people. So the Russians have a right to be angry. They took the brunt of World War II casualties.
Oh, yeah.
And I write about it. The book I'm writing now is another sequel, and I talk about the Gustav gun. And the Gustav gun was the biggest railway gun in the world. It doesn't really make sense. They say they built it for the Maginot Line. Yeah, but it took like 5 years to build and untold millions of Reichsmarks. And it's like, they say they lobbed a shell in the Crimea on Sebastopol to a Russian ammunition bunker that had the biggest explosion of World War II. Fast forward to Yemen. A CIA friend said, look at this video. This is years ago. Look at this video on Yemen. That is not an ammunition bunker. That is a tactical nuke. And you can look up some of these videos. Massive explosions. And you see this trickling of light and sparkles like fireworks. And he says, that's the electromagnetic signature left over. And he says, we have tactical nukes now where the radiation signature dissolves in 48 to 72 hours. So it's not a useless weapon anymore. These tactical nukes are, I think, in my opinion, they're used. And they have been used since World War II.
You know, it's interesting. You said October 44, there was apparently an atomic bomb. Apparently,
that's a story. Yeah, I don't have any proof.
But I find it interesting because I think of this date, 1945, that these people in the programs, the secret space program, are told that the Earth was destroyed by a cobalt bomb in 1945, and they can no longer return. They can no longer go back. And I think it's an interesting year that they chose. And that's the closest I've heard of an actual explosion, to that date. I don't know. I just connecting some dots here.
45 is also the end of World War II.
Right. It's the end of the World War.
Like, why did they choose that date exactly? Yeah. That's interesting.
Well, like Philip K. Dick, you can talk about alternative timelines. The Man in the High Castle. Probably true that there was a timeline when that did happen, and there was another one where the Germans and Japanese did win the war. Of course, the Nazis never lost; they never signed off when they all went to Antarctica or the United States or Argentina.
They infiltrated the United States and behind the scenes. Yeah.
Well, trust me, my grandfather worked with some of those guys.
Exactly. So
he knew Dornberger of Bell Helicopter, and others, through the Project Paperclip. I mean, my grandfather said he knew Von Braun and Kurt Debus. They were American heroes to me growing up. They were all like, oh, Von Braun, the moon race. I was so proud. Now I'm like, shit. The whole place was full of Nazis.
Was it you that was saying how Operation Paperclip, how it got its name was they literally just paperclipped a new identity on top of the old form because Truman had made it illegal for Nazis to enter the U.S. So they had to.
That's just boilerplate stuff.
Right. But I think I've heard you talk about that before.
But if you do some research on big banks and corporations in the 50s, there's always a Reinhard Schmidt, on the board. And it's like, Reinhard Schmidt, who the hell's that? That's not his real name, but they demanded, the story is they demanded, after the 1952 overflight of DC, which people can still see. Everyone's like, I don't believe in UFOs. I'm like, Christ, look up the headline from 1952.
That's like a document. It's a documented, verifiable event.
More than likely, that was the Germans saying, hey, hi, Guten Tag, and they said, we want be on boards, we want to be in corporations, we want to be everywhere. And of course, we were like, let's share technology. Absolutely, why not? Now, there were a lot of Americans who were very angry at that. I'll tell you a story I found out. In Huntsville, Alabama, a lot of the Germans settled there. Back in the 50s, when NASA was started, Huntsville was a very racist place. I'm sorry. It was. And the Germans liked that. So that's number one. Always remember why Houston in the South, there's some, trigonometry with rockets and other things, the azimuth, being further south on Cape Canaveral. But still, they were much more comfortable in the Jim Crow South, the Germans. But at the Huntsville NASA facility, a guy told me this years ago. And I was in a car club. I have an old Mercedes from 1969. He's like, all the top Germans drove S-Class Mercedes on a standard NASA military salary. Well, all the Americans were pissed off. This was the Martin Bormann Schluss Fund, no doubt. And they had big houses in Huntsville, and they had Mercedes and all this stuff they never wanted for anything. And it's because of that. I thought that was story. He's like, you could see all the Chevrolets and Fords in the NASA parking lot, and then there's a row of Mercedes all parked together in a special spot. I thought that was kind of funny.
Right. It's funny you mentioned NASA. How you said that the generals and the admirals in the Cold War didn't know that they weren't some really. Some didn't.
But very few. Yeah,
but that's also how NASA operates. Those NASA scientists don't understand that they're not working on the cream of the crop.
It's all compartmentalized. Yep.
Yeah,
exactly. You need to know.
NASA's always been military. It was never a civilian organization. If you look at their bylaws and everything, they could prove it. They presented it on TV as if it was, but it wasn't.
It's a defense organization, right, or something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. It comes under national security protocols, lickety split.
So what do you think's going on with SpaceX? There's a lot of controversy there, but.
I got a lot of hate on Twitter when I would do my memes on Elon Musk. I don't trust the guy. Number one, he is Afrikaner German origin.
Oh, really?
I'm not saying all Afrikaner Germans are racist or whatever, but they don't have the greatest human rights record. And there are rumors that AIDS and Ebola were bioweapons that were let out to decimate African populations. I don't know if that's true, but it sure does make sense. A lot of ex-Nazis did go down to South Africa after the war. That's proven. I'm not saying Elon Musk is a Nazi. A lot of people think he's this new age guy who's a genius, who created PayPal. And then now all of a sudden his amazing chemical rockets are going to mine space and make everything wonderful. And I'm like,
we're already...
Yeah, the space mining
already in space.
4 years ago. You can't do that with chemical rockets.
No.
Everyone's like, oh no, it can land itself. And I'm like, that looks like CG to me. I got a lot of flack for that.
Well, some of those videos, I swear were CGI. When the rocket's landing back on the pad, 100%. I'm like, who's falling for this? Like, I've seen video games look better than this.
Right. But people love him because he's seen as a Messiah savior. And I assure you, I'm not saying he's all dark. I think he's a very complex man. Yes, he's very smart. But I find, these, the Facebook kid and other, these geniuses that come out of nowhere and all of a sudden they're running, $1 trillion companies. I find that problematic.
They seem like puppets to me.
Yeah, they seem like individuals.
Controlled puppets. Yeah.
Yeah. Some people say they're bio robots.
I mean, it's possible. Maybe. Yeah.
I
wouldn't be surprised.
A lot of people don't understand. I'm sorry to take a lot of tangents, but World War II is my thing.
Mm-hmm.
I've recently found out. Mengele was this guy. I think Mengele must have read The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells probably 100 times because, he was involved in the worst experiments in the Nazi death camps. But there's a story going around that he and others invented a retrovirus. Now, I'm writing this in my new book, and it's a very horrifying story, so I apologize to everyone, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The story goes, and I tend to believe it because the Nazis obviously were brutal, just, unconscionable.
Oh, yeah.
And that they had a program going back to the 34, I think, where they would impregnate mothers with this special retrovirus, but then beat them regularly. And I mean, beat the shit out of them. And what they found was when the baby was born and grew 3, 4, 5 years old, that young man, or I don't think there was a lot of women, but there may be some, was very tough child. It was almost feral, but it in conjunction with this mysterious retrovirus, which I think was modifying DNA even back then, they were experimenting and trying an improved Aryan soldier. Now, I've found some references to this in certain books and things, but given what I know about the Nazis and what they're really up to in the occult, it would not surprise me if the story's true. And I'm writing it that way.
Yeah.
It's a horrible story to think about these poor mothers. There were a lot of child deaths and mothers dying. To do this brutal, almost Neanderthal type thing to make a very tough child.
It's just pure psychopath.
Mengele is just, and he had apparently he had a laboratory in Paraguay before the war, because the Nazis have been down in South America a lot. San Carlos to Bariloche, that there were settlers in the 19th century in the wheat, the sheep, cattle down in that part of Argentina in the mountains. And when the Germans move to a new land, they take their culture with them. They don't really assimilate. Correct me if I'm wrong out there, but if you go down to San Carlos to Bariloche, it looks like Munich, and they speak German, not Spanish. And of course, there's all kinds of stories about that, Project Paperclip and presidents going down there, and Hitler being buried not too far away if he made it there.
Are you familiar with the movie Boys from Brazil?
Yeah, it's a very good movie.
Well, I mean, who was it? George Green. He was on Carrie Cassidy, Project Camelot, and he claims that movie is direct disclosure of the cloning operation that was going on at that time. And
I think there's something to that. Whatever the experiment really was, whether they're using Adolf Hitler's, you have to remember Adolf Hitler. From everything I've known about him, I must have read 50 books on the guy. People say, oh, he wasn't that smart. No, he was pretty smart. He wasn't a coward. He won the Iron Cross in the trenches. He was gassed, and then he had hysterical blindness and other things. The Tula Society, I wrote this into my book, Lion, Tiger, Bear. I don't know if it's true, but it's a possibility. The rumor is that his illegitimate father was Kaiser Wilhelm II. Now, royalty throughout the era, that's common to have out of wedlock children. And sometimes they would care for them. If that's true, a lot of people say he looks like his father, Alois Hitler, but he does. But anyway, the Vril Society, this is a very, very old, it goes back to the Lords of the Black Stone, the Black Sun societies, all these things in the 19th century coming up to it's nothing new. Everyone thinks, oh, it's a new thing. No, it wasn't.
No.
They wouldn't have chosen this guy had he not had some interesting bloodlines, whatever they were, royal or otherwise.
Yeah.
But I wrote it that's a possibility, why they chose him. And of course, he wasn't an idiot. He was a psychopath, but he wasn't an idiot. A lot of psychopaths have to have a high IQ quotient.
They're very intelligent. Yeah.
Mengele was a genius, mad genius.
But zero empathy.
Right. Now we're getting into duality and good and evil, and it's all relative and gray.
And a very effed up morality system where they think basically it's like might equals right, Well, like if I can do whatever I want, then that's makes it okay. That's kind of like
that's like
psychopaths,
One man psychopath is
what do you know about Karl Haushofer? You know anything about Karl Haushofer?
I've drilled down in my books about the Nazi occult. Haushofer was a heroin addict. He was unreliable, but that doesn't mean he didn't know his shit. Haushofer was very well versed in the occult. So was Rudolf Hess. And you can read that in my other book.
Was he not the one who groomed Hitler? According to what I've read, he was kind of given the task to groom Hitler into his position after a trip he had made to Tibet and spent some time with at the Tibetan monastery, the Green Dragon Society or something like that.
Yeah, there is a story that he did. Remember, Rudolf Hess was born in Alexandria, Egypt. He grew up with mystics. He was very much of a mystic himself. He was a romantic. And he certainly admired Hitler. And I think personally, the Vril Society and the Tula Society, they said, groom this guy for us. He's rough around the edges, but he's no dummy. He speaks well. And Hess, by all accounts, some accounts, there's a book called The Pink Triangle that asserts that a lot of the Nazi high command were gay. Certainly Ernst Röhm of the SA, the brown shirts, was gay. His idea was the sacred band of Thebes from Greece. Get gay lovers to fight for you and they'll fight, which did happen in history. When the Nazis kind of had a portion of that twisted military homosexual ethos. But besides that, I think Rudolf Hess was, he was a co-author of Mein Kampf, pretty rigid book. If I got through it once, but I think it took a year off my life.
Yeah.
But Haushofer, Hess, Himmler, these people were very well versed in the occult.
Right.
Everyone says, "Oh, Hitler wasn't in the occult." That's a fucking lie.
That is the lie.
Himmler, Hess, Haushofer, and Hitler and other Nazi high commands were vegetarians. Why? Do you guys know?
They understood. Well, they understood about vibrations, and well, go ahead. I'll let you.
Okay. There's a book called The Coming Race.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
Lord Buller Lytton. They took that seriously. Now there are stories that they went down to Agartha and whatnot. And I write about that in my books. But the higher vibrational people only ate plants. Now I find it curious that none of them drank. Haushofer took heroin, but he didn't drink alcohol because that lowers your vibration. Evil spirits. Some say it creates a portal in your pineal gland if you drink when you black out. And certainly everyone does stupid things and they can't remember. So that's where you win a bar bet on that one.
Right.
Evil spirits. That's where we get the name spirits from.
Sure.
They were all vegetarians. They didn't drink. And I think Himmler did some other it's amazing what they did. And it's like, why? Pork, beer, this was German staples.
Yeah, the Nazis were very into the occult. Their symbol, the swastika, is an occult symbol. It's a very ancient symbol. And so what they did was they banned the occult, anything on the surface level for everyone else, because they didn't want anyone else to have this knowledge.
Right.
Because it creates a power. It creates a power.
They closed all the Masonic halls in the 30s.
They closed everything. They banned it. Yep.
And they weren't even in power, but they had the horsepower to do, they were in power in 33. And so they closed all that stuff down. They had the Atlantis Society in Berlin. The building still survives. You can see it. The SS were obsessed with Atlantis lore.
Yep.
Guess who else was? I guess the U.S. Navy. So, this stuff, it starts to get, they probably learned it. The Navy had good spies in Germany all through the 30s.
Yeah.
William Tompkins writes about that, and it's true. So everyone has, this twisted version of what the Nazis were into. I write about the Ahnenerbe SS. I write about Edmund Geer and Ernst Schaefer, their characters in my books. And, they're not saints or anything, but, a lot of the Ahnenerbe, like Bruno Beger, he had Jewish prisoners killed at Auschwitz so he could have a museum of skeletons. Here's the Aryan Supermen. Here are the inferior, homosexuals, Jews, and Russians. I mean, it's sick. But, a lot of this stuff, just because they were psychopaths doesn't mean a lot of it wasn't true. But the history books have told us, oh, no, they were all crazy.
Well,
no, they weren't.
Part of the reason I think they were vegan or they didn't eat meat and didn't drink is because they were trying to connect with ETs, communicate with other races. And they understood that you couldn't do that unless you could get as close to you as you could to matching their vibration. And it would
Right.
be, it makes it easier for the other being to communicate with you if you're at a higher vibration.
Right. You're matching frequencies.
Right.
And so let's just say for giggles, regressives, Aldebarans, or whatever, we're meeting with the Nazis, which I write. I believe that. Call me crazy, but it doesn't matter what your polarity is, but frequency in everything in the cosmos is important, and balance between that is doubly important. And everything is about balancing of frequencies and vibration, frequency.
Right.
So they understood that. And the swastika is interesting. A lot of people get this wrong. When it was the Boy Scouts used to have it, and the Native Americans always had it, but the Nazis reversed it.
Yeah, they did. Yep.
Now the swastika has a million meanings, good fortune and everything, but the Nazis knew, and Haushofer knew this, and Hess knew it. I know that. It also is this torsion, spiral, twisting of the universe and the cosmos, galaxies, everything spins. Everything spins. Yep. The solar system, it's all torsion.
Yep.
So they knew it meant that as well. And it also meant, they thought it meant inevitable victory. So when you reverse that symbol, that was a powerful gesture. Everyone's like, oh, they got it wrong. They reversed it. No, they knew exactly what they were doing when they picked it. I think the Vril Society picked it for them, I think.
Well, right. And they they reverse it, or some people say hijack a lot of those benevolent symbols. A lot of things that we're taught now that are like are superstitious or bad, like the number 13 or 666, like taking that, like 13, if you go back and read, I don't know where you would find any literature on it, but you can do some research, and it's actually a very positive number. It means good luck, but they've reversed that. And
the pentagram, the upside down pentagram, it's supposed to be right side up as a positive symbol, and they invert it to upside down, and then that becomes the satanic, and that's what the cabal uses. That it's like they invert everything, so it becomes negative rather than a positive.
Yeah, it's energy is energy. Symbols are neutral, just like energy.
Exactly.
You use it for what you will. But and Jordan Maxwell does a great job at piecing together symbolism throughout time itself, and how my favorite is the circle with a cross in it, which was the ancient in its ancient form meant peace.
Yeah,
you see that carved on rocks with a spiral.
They flip it upside down.
Spiral, I think, denotes, hey, this is a portal. Here's the frequency. Have at it. Have fun. And you see that all through the Southwest, at Newgrange in Ireland. Always the spiral, the Celtic spiral. And all these were pretty much universal out in the universe symbols. Because apparently ETs, when telepathy is used to communicate, it's nothing but holographic representations of symbols. And imagine what a swastika symbol used in context with others, how much information you could put out in 1/1,000,000th of a second.
Yeah.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. And so that's where they carved them on rocks. Everyone looked at it. Okay, it's like a McDonald's menu. Oh yeah, Big Mac. Okay, yeah, we're going into this portal, and we'll do some astral traveling, and
Well, that's just it. They understood the power of these symbols, and they understood how to utilize them. And that's like what I was saying, 666, that reduces down to 9, which is a completion number. And it can be used in rituals and ceremonies as a completion. Now, what are they trying to complete? That's the big question. And I find that very interesting.
I mean, symbols are fascinating. I've tried my best at symbology. It's very complicated. And it's interpretational, of course. And they have multiple meanings, which doesn't make anything easier. But I think symbols are important. We're not taught, we're taught, the Christian cross. That's a pre-Diluvian symbol for reincarnation, resurrection.
Yep.
It doesn't have anything to do with Christianity. They co-opted it out of Mithraism, which was popular in ancient Rome. Funny, Mr. Mithra had 12 disciples too.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Look up Mithraism. I went to a church school up here at the National Cathedral. Never mentioned it. We had to study the Bible, and actually Christian history was very interesting, because I'm like, wait a minute, papal armies? the Pope had his armies. What's going on with, the Medicis and everything? And they were like, we're going to skip over that chapter.
Yeah.
Don't worry about that. They're hiding something.
Right.
Yeah.
Hidden history. Everything is. I mean, that's what everything
is.
Yeah. I mean, the textbook history that we get is the indoctrinated version of their reality. They want, we talk about this all the time, but just by this discussion, every topic we want to go back to, whatever we decide to talk about, we can all pretty much agree that the mainstream story is bogus. And no matter what, because they started off on the wrong foot. I mean, we were never, it's never been what we've thought it was. And that's what we're coming to realize now.
Yeah. What's interesting, because I'm a historian, I collect history books, not a lot, but I got one off of, I think, eBay years ago. It's an 1855 book on American and European history. And I believe it was for either high school or college. Anyway, it's 6 inches thick. Now, if you look at a high school, 12th grade or whatever history book, it's 1/3 the size.
Yeah.
Right.
It's stuff like that gives you great pause. And colleges are getting rid of their, music and arts programs and everything. They want everyone hive-minded and ignorant and stupid and towing the party line, which is the matrix line.
Yeah.
You only need to know this, go work in a cubicle on a computer and, punch a clock as a debt slave. And so it's obvious. And, but people say, oh no, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do this and that. And they have a clever way of funneling students into certain careers.
And the careers that make all the money are the ones that serve the system the best.
Right.
And you wonder why. I
wonder if finance, economics, or you go in the military, which I almost did. But I was like, no, I'm not good with authority, so I didn't. But and then they send you to it's either finance, that, or politics, which is nonsense. It's just distilled judgment. Even my dad was like, oh, they're all bought and paid for.
Right.
I mean, he was fairly honest as a politician, but he told me interesting things. He said, they're all bought and paid for. And he said, to get elected, you have to lie. There's no way for anyone to get elected to Congress in this country or president without lying. The people will not, they cannot take if you tell the truth. Because I said, well, I'm going to run for Senate in Virginia and I'm going to tell the truth. He's like, you'll be gone in the first round.
Yeah.
The system won't let you. Yeah, exactly.
So, and he was a very successful politician. He was able to befriend, and he tried to do a lot of good things for the state of Virginia, but he still towed the status quo line. And, but I learned a lot from him just by osmosis.
Yeah.
This is what I don't want to be.
Sure.
This is what I learned from him.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a military officer. And, because it's my personal belief that if you become a military officer, I don't care what branch, you sign a pile of documents, somewhere there's a code number. And that code number, it's your responsibility to look it up, which I doubt you can even find it. But says, hey, national security, if you work in sensitive programs and you tattletale after you're out of the service and you're at the bar drinking beer, we have the right to hang you. And so this is why a lot of these admirals over the years, one friend of my dad, I said, what can you tell me about the Navy secret technology, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I can't tell you because I take my national security oath seriously. But maybe you should read this book. So, he would write down 5 books and I'm
steering in the right direction.
Right, and basically saying, you're going to find a lot of the truth here. Mm-hmm. And so that was my life. I've always been in the room. I look around, I'm like, God, I was everywhere with this stuff. I remember my dad and Jimmy Carter, they weren't real good friends, but Jimmy Carter, most people don't realize, he ran on a platform in 1976 on ending UFO secrecy. He had seen 2 of them.
Yeah.
But people forget this history. It's not told to us. And the current crop of the disclosure movement, they don't look back and they piece together things in a historical context. They come right out of the box and say, oh my God, the Wasatch Mountains were building Navy. And oh, by the way, there's 1 million kids in there with no context. And by the way, there's Nazis that have been age regressed, but there's no historical context to put that in.
Yeah.
I came to this very slowly. My mother gave me UFO books and magazines to read. She never believed in the moon landing. I think we went there. We just weren't alone, obviously.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
But, some of the later missions, Apollo 12.
Well, why did we
Kubrick
just
was working overtime in London.
The big question is, everyone's caught up on whether the moon landing was fake or not, but the better question is, why did we just suddenly stop going to the moon for no reason?
Well, we didn't.
Well, we didn't exactly publicly. Why did they? Oh, we're just done. We're done with that.
Skylab, the space shuttle. Space shuttle was a piece of shit. Hell, I'm not even a rocket scientist. I understand cars and engineering and ships. And I said, first of all, it's ugly. I was there. My dad took me to the USS Enterprise unveiling, and all the Star Trek people came in the 70s out of Dulles Airport. I was there with him. And I said, this is the ugliest fucking thing, spaceship. And they all the start, William Shatner, everybody, they were like, oh my God, it's so ugly. Where's the real Enterprise? Well, little do they know, we were building real enterprises somewhere else, and this was the public face of our technology, and it was shit.
Right.
Now, did the Germans blow up one? Did the O-rings go? I don't know. But you were spam in the can.
Right.
Yeah.
It's sad. I feel so sorry for the people who died in those rigs. The military stuff, people die all the time in training. But
that's the sad part is I think about that when you're watching like NASA footage of everybody at like Houston or Mission Control or something, and they're all like celebrating and crying because a rover landed on Mars, and they're like tears pouring down their face, and it's if because they believe that they were really this is all real, and I feel bad for these people. I'm like, if you only knew,
they have no idea at all. It's all compartmentalized.
I'm sorry if you can't crack a book or two or watch a video or two. I'm sorry. I don't feel sorry for them at all.
Yeah.
I understand people are understandably ignorant and ill-informed by and large in society. It's an agenda.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But my God, there's so much shit out there, but no one goes there because they think, oh, it's the fringe.
Yeah.
But that's changing. It's changing slowly, but there's going to come a time, I think within 15 years, where people are going to start catching big lies that the U.S. government and the media are telling us, and they're like, wait a minute, maybe we should go listen to those guys on Journey to Truth. I think they've got a point, and everyone else. Yeah. There's going to be this consciousness shift. It's coming slowly. 35 years ago, there was no one. I was, people that had never heard of Stephen Greer or anybody now. And now I have friends who, at least since 2017, they say, well, it's interesting. I was watching you and Stephen Greer. I find that interesting. And I'm like, oh my God, the skies are falling.
Yeah.
when did you get a clue? I'm sorry.
Right. Well, and it's good though, because people are opening their minds up to it, and we're getting to a point where it's not a laughable topic anymore. And that's partially because of this UAP disclosure narrative.
I told Chris that. I said, you and Elizondo have done us a solid. You've opened the conversation, which was dead.
Yeah.
It's not a laughing stock matter anymore.
Yeah. News agencies were told to give the UFO subject the giggle factor. Yeah. That's a quote. And that's what they use, and they get beautiful women up there with the halo effect, and and going, oh, ha ha ha. I mean, I have a friend who has a show on Fox. What's her name? Oh God. Anyway, she does that program there. She gave Stephen Greer 2 minutes. 2 minutes, and then she cut him off. Why did they even bother?
Oh, yeah.
Just a pique interest.
Laura Ingraham. I knew her.
Laura Ingraham, yeah.
Yeah. So Laura's a nice person, but, at least they had Greer on. I'll give them that. But everyone's like, "Oh, Hannity's on our side," and then what is it, Tucker Carlson? And I'm like,
no,
I've been around DC all my life. These people, if they're given this much, they'll run with that, and they won't expand on it at all. And Tucker Carlson's has Chris Mellon on and Lou Elizondo. Oh, hey, you guys are heroes.
Well,
what?
They won't
lying to the American people, misdirecting this topic.
Right.
We will never get disclosure from the military or the U.S. government.
Well, that shows you those people. It's all part of the same system. When Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and these so-called disclosure people that are telling the truth get all the mainstream coverage. That's all the mainstream wants to cover and talk about. What does that tell you? They're a part of the system, or they're being used, maybe unwittingly, but they're being used by the system for an agenda. It's all pretty obvious.
Your audience knows all this stuff, but it's like when I go back and I've seen things talked about over the years. They're doing the same old thing now. They're just doing more of it.
Yeah.
UAP task force, UAP office. That's a joke. That's where all the dead letters go on Capitol Hill. Oh my God, emails and dead letters. People still write letters. And they're like, oh my God, I saw a disc and the Greys abducted my dog, and it's like, oh, that's very interesting. And they throw it into the pit.
If they even read it.
These things, Project Blue Book, these things have been around, these tactics, but they're running out of ideas and they're running out of time.
Yep.
And the reason I know that is because they wouldn't have a Mellon come out there talking about this bullshit if they weren't getting internal pressure. Now, I don't know who it is. The deep state, the military, and the Pentagon are full of factions. They always have been, UFOs or otherwise, but somebody's saying, get out there and do a dog and pony show and play it up good this time. Get a band, get a stage, get clowns, and oh my God,
Yeah.
Well, my theory,
whatever, just keep doing it so people will know that we're on top of things, and we're not. We're still not.
Right. My theory is that these people aren't going to blackmail themselves. They all have blood on their hands. They're not going to come on and say, "Oh, we've been lying to you. We've had this technology the whole time." They're not going to do it. So with this new report, which was a nothing burger, that they even had the audacity to put a weather balloon in there again. But and they said that I forgot how they worded it, but it was basically nothing. They were saying it was still inconclusive, whatever. But why are they doing this? Because when it does come out, they want their hands, they're free of it, and they're going to start pointing fingers at Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop, all these aerospace industries. And they're going to say it's their black budget programs that was doing this stuff and not the military. That's what I think is going on.
Some of them might, but remember, all those corporations, they own all the congressmen and senators.
Yeah.
They own them.
Mm-hmm.
It's tied together.
Dad sided himself with the Navy and Marines so no one would fuck with him. But dealing with the Navy and Marines is still dealing with Lockheed Martin and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas and all the military contractors. But, so he was smart enough to do that. But I met a woman who was running for Congress, and she, oh my God, this is years ago, but she spent $25 million of her husband's money. Then they got divorced, obviously, and didn't make it to Senate or Congress. I can't remember which one it was. And I said, why'd you do that? And she's like, oh, I've got the fire in the belly. I really want to change things. And I said, you're not going to change anything. Nothing sensitive. And she's like, oh, no. I said, what about UFOs? And, I'll get all that. I'll tackle all that. And I said, with respect, you won't. Because they'll put the kibosh on you, even if you make it to being a senator or congresswoman. They will not let you talk about that. She was so utterly naive. She was in her 40s. Mm-hmm. I said, my dad's a senator. You know who my dad is. I'm telling you the truth. You're not going to change jack shit. Sure, you can get a road built in Buckwheat County, Fuckville. Nothing else. Our schools and roads and bridges fall apart because the money's going to the deep state and all the military stuff. And Chris Mellon is out there yelling threat, threat, threat. UAP threat, Tic Tac threat.
And
there's a great truth to that because they want plausible deniability.
Yep.
It's insidious. I sent him a message. I probably didn't get it. And I said, that's low, man. You're low.
It's a whole control system that's very compartmentalized, and the real stuff and the real power goes on in these black things that are like very, very hidden and very secretive and very controlled, and everything's compartmentalized and need to know. So what we see, the politicians we see on the surface level are basically all puppets, and they don't really have any real power, essentially. And they're kept in the dark.
Not in the sensitive. It's some
the sensitive
power,
stuff.
Not the big stuff, not the big boys.
And this is one of the things I do like that Stephen Greer talks about, is that he exposes that with a lot of his info and documentaries, like these what does he call special access project, unacknowledged special access projects, and where he exposes how, like, presidents, we think the kind of mindset most people have is that the president has all this power and they're in charge of everything. No, and that's not true at all. They have managers. They're way down the food chain. Yeah.
Stephen Greer has this quote, and he got it from I think a senator, and it's true. Presidents are transient custodians of the status quo.
Exactly.
More, and that's I believe the story when Obama was put in office, that Bush Sr. went in there and said, you listen to me, you
blah, blah, blah.
Man of color. Mm-hmm. This is how the real world works. I believe that. And his Secretary of State, Susan Rice, is a high school friend of mine. And I talked about it with Susan, but she's a straight shooter on that. She does not delve into this kind of stuff. They don't want people that think like us. They don't want. We're loose cannons.
There's an old Joe Rogan comedy skit from stand up from 2005 where he talks about, voting for a president is like rooting for pro wrestling. They want you to think that you have some sort of say in it, but really. And then it's like they intentionally put a dumb guy in charge to find out how dumb the population is,
almost as a joke for them. To be like, look, we can even put somebody this dumb as the president and people will still think it's real. And still think.
And that reminds me now I know the second thing I want to talk about that's unpopular with some people, but I'm going to say it anyway. I've been very close to politics all my life. No offense to the Trump folks and the QAnon folks. I don't mean offense to anyone. But they're putting all their eggs in one basket with Donald Trump. And I'm like, holy shit, no way.
He's not a savior. Yeah.
When I was looking at the QAnon stuff, my military friends said, those are genuine actionable codes. But the stuff they're talking about with 107, and I love Carrie Cassidy, but damn it, she's on this JFK Jr. is alive thing.
Right.
I hope the guy's alive. I knew him when I was young. My sister knew him very well. That's not him. My sister and her friends knew JFK Jr. extremely well. This guy complaining 107. JFK Jr. was not religious. Religion is part of our control system worldwide problem. That's a
Amen.
Thing.
Thank you.
I don't know why Kerry Cassidy would support this guy if he's saying, prophecies in God, and we're going to liberate children, and God's will, and I'm like, that's a huge red flag.
I don't steer anybody.
Don't bring religion into this fucking mess. That's what got us into this mess in the first fucking place.
No, you're good. I don't steer anybody towards 107.
It's nonsense. It's a psyop. Penny Bradley said it to me years ago. I mean, it's obvious. Now, I'm not saying Trump's a bad guy. Come on, he worked with the mob getting all his buildings built in New York. My sister knew the guy. It's. This guy knows the deep state, how it works. Yes, I'm sure he's done some good things, some positive things, but he is not this savior messiah that people say he is.
No,
I don't think he's going to run with JFK Jr., even if the guy still is alive. I mean, I hope he's still alive. Nice guy.
I'm starting to think.
He wasn't the smartest tool in the shed either.
No. I'm starting, and especially when he's like pushing the jab and certain things like that are like,
no, that's
okay. What's that about?
What the hell?
Yeah.
I mean, critical thinking.
I think he was more
field. You know, and there's lack of critical thinking. It's like you need to piece all this stuff together.
Mhm.
And there's only a few of us that do. And I say that with sadness. I'm not trying to be an asshole, but it's like the disclosure movement is completely at odds, infighting and just dysfunctional. It's like when the general public starts to turn to everyone in the disclosure movement, it's going to be a shit show because no one can agree on fucking anything.
There's so many different narratives.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
Well, you know, this is a
Divide
good
and conquer. Divide and conquer.
This is a good point to bring up because while Trump was still president, we were always talking about Q and Trump, and we were, you know, we supported him, and we were all, you know, Trump. But now, as things are playing out, you know, we've backed away from that, and we're not so gung ho about that. And it's been it's a learning process for all of us. But I agree with you. I don't think, like, at this point, I mean, yeah, of course, if he's the better option right now, if then, you know, then this thing we have in office.
Yes, he is.
But he's the better option. But I don't think, like you said, don't put all your eggs in one basket with him, because on some level, I'm sure he's a puppet also. You know, he's not.
Or, well, what I think, if the alliance is real, and because there was certain intel that said the alliance recruited Trump to be, you know, the guy to run against Hillary, and they're going to make sure she doesn't win with the manipulation and blah blah blah. If that's true, I think he was mostly just like a placeholder. So they knew they couldn't have a deep state person like Hillary, of course, in the White House and in power. So they needed somebody as a placeholder while they can do the real operations behind the scenes and start cleaning stuff up.
That's what Daryl James said. He said that Trump was there just to stay out of their way.
Yes.
Trump was there so they could have somebody in
that's
that place,
not deep state,
to stay out of their way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he technically he is part of the deep state, but you know, this is the problem. Everyone thinks it's a black and white alliance versus deep state, and I'm like,
no,
no, that's not the traditional way. All this stuff has been going on since World War II. It's factions fighting factions and maybe cooperation on some things. Mm-hmm. I'm sure Trump and his military, you know, the military is very pro-Trump. That I've sussed out with my contacts, my friends who were in the military. They were like, oh yeah. And that's a good thing, because you're never going to get controlled disclosure with truth in it without some military backing, because, you know, as you know, the real black hats in the deep state, you know, they'd rather crack the earth in half than have some of this stuff come out.
Right.
I mean it.
Yeah.
Because they can leave the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're like, fuck these guys.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, the earth is a garden planet. It's a very valuable part of the cosmos. It's alive, Gaia. It has a soul. It's ascending through the ascension process, I think, as well as we are. We're part of that.
Exactly.
And so it gets very complicated with metaphysics, and that's why I say everyone's focused on politics. And it's like, my God, if there's anything my dad taught me, is politics is complete bullshit for the most part.
It's a fake show.
Right.
You're not going to get anywhere. You know, I'm going to vote for Trump and we'll have disclosure. It's like, it's not going to work that way.
Well,
100%. It save anyone.
It's designed to siphon your energy. They want you to put your energy into that instead of focusing on the real issues, and even yourself, you know.
Yeah, that's the thing. Instead of focusing on yourself, working on yourself, you've got a million distractions. You got pro football, you got politics, it's all bread and circuses and distraction.
Yeah. Right.
I've seen it all my life. It's amazing. My dad said, well, when you get up there and you got a sensitive issue, you got to give a speech on, you're like, well, it's like Lou Elizondo. It's like, well, I can't speak to that UFO sighting, but I can speak to, you know, my sailboat, which I'm varnishing right now.
Yeah.
And, I go out there and I see strange things in the sky, but I don't know what they are. And all of a sudden the original question is forgotten.
Well, Lou Elizondo always dances around the remote viewing topic also, because
that's 1960s stuff.
I know, but he acts like, I just watched a recent interview with him and he was asked about it. And, you know, he had this very like, oh, I can't talk about that. You know, it was just like, he makes it so mysterious for some reason. Like, well, I don't know, what's he actually doing?
U.S. Army Counterintelligence Handbook 101.
Yeah.
I mean, he's out there diluting and shifting the narrative sideways. It's the analogy I always give in my interviews is very apt. You have a frozen lake. You put a Corvette out there with 1,000 horsepower. They're putting more power to the ground, but they're only going in circles.
Yeah.
Oh, see, we're moving ahead with this UAP officing. We're advancing. No, you're just creating something else. You're putting more gas down, but you're still going in a circle.
Mm-hmm.
And so people think, well, gosh, this circle, now there's 10 Corvettes out there going in a circle and they're going 500 miles an hour. And I'm like, it's still a circle.
Yeah. 100%.
They're going nowhere. It's a common counterintelligence tactic.
Right.
And because America believes that, generally believes what they see on the media, it's a problem. They can go out there and say, there's only one alien on planet Earth, and it's my cousin John Warner, and everyone's like, oh, I knew it. And they're coming after me. People will believe anything.
Right.
It's sad. We're dealing with a multifaceted, multi-pronged problem. Everyone's asleep. They've been taught incorrect history. They're ignorant. They're lazy and they're tired. They're overworked. They're drinking beer, and all that stuff. And then you've got the religions doing their thing, which is, don't worry. God works in mysterious ways.
And go to heaven when you die.
And not eat God, but and then you have the media and the government and all the distractions. I mean, it's amazing anyone pays any attention to the UFO, ET, hidden history subject at all.
Well, it's
amazing.
People
They
don't
never used to.
People don't understand how it's relevant to their lives. Like they don't understand I can tell people stuff and I've gotten a response. Okay, well, how does that affect me? Well, when you really start researching and diving into it, you realize it's all connected and it affects it massively
every
affects
way
us.
Possible. Exactly.
It's
all
exactly.
connected.
The law of one and Hermetic law and everything, we're all one. I mean, we're having these different experiences. Christ, a third of our lives is spent in the astral world, asleep, dreaming. I wake up exhausted. I'm like doing all kinds of strange things, and I'm very busy at night. In my dreams, I tell my wife, it's like, you look exhausted. And I say, shit, I was in doing all this stuff, and I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, that's just they're dreams. I smoke pot and I have dreams. And I'm like, no, your mind is always there. Your soul is out doing strange things. I have dreams where I wake up, they're very vivid and lucid, and I'm fighting in the Civil War or the Revolutionary War. And I'm like, shit. Yes, I know a lot about history and stuff, but it's real and it's frightening. But, the problem is, we have a million problems, so we should call it just challenges. That's a political dodge right there. Oh, we don't have any problems. We just have challenges.
Challenges.
Yeah. It sounds like my dad. There's so few of us doing this work, but I mentor 5 people. I say that with humility. I say, you think for yourself, and don't take my word for it. Go do your own research. But they generally ask my opinions on certain things. And I say, look, I think that certainly within 20 years, the rest of my lifetime, a lot of people will start coming towards the disclosure movement and all of its periphery people, megaliths, archaeology, Anunnaki, everything. They're going to start to turn to us. And we have a responsibility to get our shit together and get it straight, as straight as we can. It's a mess. But I've pieced together everything, and it kind of sort of makes sense. And the history never did. And you piece together all the new stuff, it does make sense. Right. But there's a leap of faith. And we all have that responsibility. Even if it's like one thing that's still a very important responsibility, because now all of a sudden, people are giving us the credit that's due. And I mean everyone. I don't mean presenters or, you guys or me or I mean everyone. Because I had a friend who I've been, mentoring over the years, and they're like, oh shit, my cousin's starting to ask me questions. And I said, you have the responsibility to tell them what you think, not what I think or everyone else or Greer or Carrie Cassidy, whatever, what you think, because everything is a perspective.
Right.
And that doesn't make our job any easier. It makes it more difficult, or challenging. But nonetheless, it's the responsibility, I believe, that our higher self and our every time we reincarnate, this is our day job.
Right. Exactly. And be informed enough to be able to answer a question when somebody asks you. I don't just go out there shoving this stuff down people's throats. That doesn't work. If somebody's ready, they're going to ask you. The universe will guide them to you. They'll find a way, and then you can share whatever you feel like they can handle. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been through it. I had a friend I've known for 45 years. No closer friend exists, and I tried to break this whole thing to him in a context with Chris Mellon and the UAP and everything, and he just shut down. And now we're not friends anymore. I mean, I think a lot of us knows what that pain is. Mm-hmm. You're messing with people's hard floor of reality, and it's a big, shiny, thick wooden floor. Yep. You've got an axe, and people are like, "What are you doing? You're starting to chop away at their floor." And they're like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And they will get. One person got angry at me. Threatened to punch me or hit me with a baseball bat. He said, but that's when I learned. Oh wow, you need to talk to people that come to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Not the other way around.
Right. I mean, we want to like. How many times do we want to just like wake up, like grab somebody and shake them?
But they view it as an attack on them because people are identified with their beliefs and their version of reality, and when you come at them with information that challenges that, even if they're not consciously knowing that, they're taking it as an attack on them, and they're and you're the bad guy now, and I have to defend against you and that information instead of being open to it.
This is what my characters have to learn in a World War II setting by studying Sufi wisdom and philosophy and Carl Jung and Steiner and all that stuff, is that their version of reality is just as valid as ours. Our job is not to slap people awake. I'd love to do that, but that's a negative thing. To throw something on that. What it is, I'm trying to formulate this in my mind. I try to practice this every day. My wife and I, we're all going through holographic universe, cosmos as light beings. Everyone's reincarnated. Obviously, all of us in the disclosure movement, every single one of us is a light warrior. I think that's obvious. And I mentioned this in my books, and it's part of that is processing the pain that the closest, most wonderful people you love in the world will never cotton to what you're talking about or relate to it in this lifetime. They have incarnated and said, I'm going to be asleep my whole life, or maybe at the end of my life I'll have come to Jesus and whatever. That's to be respected, because in other words, I also like to portray this in my writing, is that all these psychopaths and Hitlers and Epsteins and all that, they're there to teach us something.
Yep.
In other words, I read a story that purports they were going to go back with a time travel operation, military operation, and kill Hitler. I'm sure a lot of people thought about that.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's the wrong thing to do, because he needs to live out his lifetime and destiny so that all of us will learn painful lessons, because evolution only comes from stress. And so it's very difficult. I'm thinking about writing this in another book, is having people go back in time. I think they found that when they do time travel, if you mess with something, like you push Abe Lincoln off a stage or something into the mud, if you alter that timeline, you're just going to create another timeline. And so they've come back from these missions and gone, well, is history changed? And they're like, no, what the hell happened? And it's like timelines merge and then they split and they feel
Mandela effects.
It's very difficult to kill someone and expect a change. If you go back and kill Adolf Hitler, somebody else would have taken his place, and we'd have pretty much a similar outcome. And that's sad with the Holocaust. It's very sad. But remember, as harsh as it is, I believe that every one of those people, those are the bravest people, or people that incarnate knowing they're going to lead a life of severe suffering and then an early death.
Right.
Like say a person in the Holocaust, Russian or Jew, or someone as a child. Now that takes, I like to think of myself, a big tough person. And it's like, wow, I didn't think of that one. I don't remember my past lives. My higher self was a bunch of jerks. They hardly tell me anything. Whatever. I get synchronicity. My wife and I are like, synchronicity. It happens to us a lot, but very dropper, stuff. I think it's amazing when people are able. I've tried regression therapy, didn't work. No one can hypnotize me, even if I wanted to be. And I think perhaps it's my higher self going. It calls me dummy. It says, "Hey, dummy. No, you're not going to learn your past lives because it's not good for you right now. You need to do what you got to do."
I agree with you
without knowing that. Because if you know all that, you won't do what you fucking need to do.
Right.
Exactly.
I say if we came here with our memories, we would never be motivated. Well, we would never do anything because we would see everything for what it is. And then you'd be like,
see, my wife and I, we work with wounded veterans at my farm twice a year. They come for a rustic black powder, with flintlock, deer hunt. And it's a very therapeutic thing for them. And it's the way she and I have been doing it for years. And it's our way of trying to give back in a hands-on, grassroots way. And it's so rewarding. I have pictures on my website. They're the most wonderful people. And, there's guys your age or even gals, and they say, "Oh my God, I've got 300 people's of shrapnel in me. I'm in chronic pain," but they can't take it out. And it's doubly painful for me and my wife because we know they have medbed technology to heal all that, cure all the kids with cancer. And I even talked about this with Chris Mellon. He's like, "Yeah, I've heard about that." And that was the one thing we fucking agreed on. Some of this, bringing out some of this technology, which I think he is trying to do, I hope, in his own weird patrician, button, coat and tie way. But that was the one thing we did agree on. And I said, I know they've got it because my OMNIA guy says, I can't talk about that, but a lot of people nod to me in conversations. I ask a question and they just nod. It's like my dad, "Hey, did you go aboard a spaceship?" And he just nods, something like that. And
it's true. I believe it's true.
That way they can say, "Well, I never told them anything."
Right.
They didn't.
I've talked to somebody within the Navy and I asked about the med beds and same thing. Like they can't tell you, but they tell you.
Well, it's for Navy SEALs and Black Ops use only.
Yeah. And
or for high importance, maybe an admiral or something.
Right. Or the elites. But John, this has been amazing, man. We've been going for close to 2 hours now. Let people know where they can find you, your website, where they can get your books, all that stuff.
My website is John W. Warner IV author.com. And all the information, and I have photos on their website. I also have a lot of notes that I've taken over the years. They're available for download. It's thousands of pages of just everything. I mean, everything under the sun. I don't, it's not personal commentary. It's just my notes.
Right.
I don't know if this, that, and the other, but I try to take notes on everything that's interesting to me.
Mm-hmm.
And, all that information is in there. And a lot of your viewers would be very familiar with it. But there are some interesting things I've done with that. And the books are available there. All my profits go to wounded veteran charities. Amazon gives me 10 cents or something. Cheap bastards. Jeff Bezos. There's another bio robot in control of trillions of dollars.
Yep.
Right.
But I'll tell you, these people, everyone's like, Elon Musk is the richest guy in the world. And I'm like, no. There are royal families in Europe, maybe the British and everything. They have hundreds of trillions.
Well, we don't know the names of
money is meaningless. It's only meaningful to the little people.
And the amount of gold on the planet is way more than is on the books.
Yeah, it's become worthless.
Way more.
It become worthless. That's another thing I found out that made me. I cried. And it was when they were looking. They knew about General Yamashita's gold stashes. The Japanese general. He was the conqueror of Singapore. and he's a nasty piece of work. But he had caches of this stuff. He raided all the Khmer ruins and everything, caves in Vietnam during World War II. A lot of the reason, I'm not 100% sure on this, but I think it's true. A lot of the reason we had to do the island hopping had to do with securing those stashes. Because as a military historian, I could tell you, we didn't need to take all those little islands, Saipan and everything like that. A lot of historians are with me on that. They're kind of like, yeah, that doesn't make much sense. Why do we do that? And I think it's because of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think that the G2 Army Intelligence and OSS and everyone, they were like, no, we need to take this little island at the cost of God knows how many thousands of lives, not only for an air base, but because there's treasure there. And who knows, there might have been crash UFOs at the time, other things.
Yeah.
Because they were definitely recovering that during the war.
Right. Right.
Chris, there's a story that I heard that there was a Navy ship. It was craning a spaceship out of the Coral Sea while it was being attacked by Japanese bombers. I mean,
that's a sci-fi movie for you right there.
Yeah, it's like right out of sci-fi. I wouldn't believe it except for the person who told me that.
Well, thanks for coming on, man. This has been great. Thanks for sharing everything with us. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, we'll put your links below. Guys, there's still tickets available to the conference. You want to come out and learn some more about the Secret Space Program, hang out with all of us, and just, finally get to be with people in person instead of online. That's what I'm looking most forward to. So come hang out with us, secretspaceconference.info. John, this is awesome. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. You guys do a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right. Would you, people, you're on Twitter, right? Can you drop your Twitter?
I'm not on Twitter. I gave it up.
Okay.
It's just too much work for too little.
It's not worth it. I get it.
I'm not looking for a reward, but everything I did, I did try to do very well. And it's obviously, they've got my number, and I know Chris and Lou.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of a lost cause.
They're on me too. And it at the end of the day, Twitter, it's a mishmash. It's a slurry of it's just a fast food fix for the human mind.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's social media in general.
Yeah.
All right. Exactly. All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time. Good night.
Good night, guys.